Hello. Um, so this is going to be brief, but it's basically yesterday I had a conversation with Michael Barker of this very group, and it actually kind of it was interesting because it kind of felt like an old sort of I don't know what you would call it, like an old correspondence, right? Because it was all voice messages, and so it felt a bit like he would say a thing, and then like some hours later I responded. Just felt interesting, kind of. Anyway, the point is he had mentioned this incredible quote from Lord of the Rings, the Two Towers, I believe, or maybe it's Return of the King. I think it's Two Towers, where Theoden, King of Rohan, says, "Hail to the victorious dead." Which is like gnarly, right? It's a cool thing to say. It's a interesting idea, like the dead, although dead, helped to win the victory, and so, it's worthwhile. But we had this discussion then that went on about what that means. Like, what is it to be victorious and dead? And I think short answer is it just means you're dead. Longer answer would be that in a lot of cultures, and this is a discussion that we had, so I'm basically just reiterating what I had said to Barker, so if Barker is watching, this won't be interesting to you. But the basic idea would be that for centuries, for most of human history, it has been war and death has been romanticized a lot, and so if you died, you gave your cause or your life for a cause. You gave your life for something valuable, like a victory that happened in the end, afterwards. And so it wasn't for nothing. And I had talked about the Viking tradition, and how in that tradition, if you died, or the only way to get to the good afterlife, which is Valhalla, is to die in battle, is to die with a sword in your hand, or an axe, or a weapon in your hand. Die in battle, die well. And there are lots of accounts of like Vikings in their last moments, worshippers of the Norse gods, like in their last moments as they're like bleeding out and like desperately clawing the ground, trying to get a grip of a weapon, like desperately trying to like hold something so that they can get to Valhalla. So hail the victorious dead. And for them, dying in battle was like this great thing. It's like huge deal, and like what your life was leading to. And that's like something that's common then in history of all people, everywhere, forever, until World War One, really. This idea that you dying is a good thing, and that you've done something good and noble by dying in battle. And it's something that's like used a lot in role-playing games, right? So like certainly in Iskloft, which is my setting, the Viking setting, like it's a big deal when you die in battle. There'd be a huge funeral and sacrifices made and great speeches made and like thanks to you for doing this great thing. The same would go for, let's say, I guess in Faerun as well, right? People die. Sometimes they're brought back, which is lame. But if they do die, heroically in a battle, then there's like this big, like, oh, well done, amazing, great. He gave his life for the cause. She gave her life for the cause, which is something. But then the discussion we got into, which I think is most interesting, is that just stopped being a thing in human history around World War One. In these trench wars where people would fight over hills, just like meaningless hills. That had names like Hill 340, that were just nothing, not important, and tens of thousands of people would die fighting over this hill. And so from then on, this idea of like hail to the victorious dead kind of vanished, and understandably, because when it's day one of the Somme and 60,000 British casualties happen, and they don't get anywhere, what is achieved? What heroes are they? It's all for nothing. So it's just something that I've been thinking about the last day or so. Don't worry, players in my games, I'm not looking to murder you. well, I'm always looking to murder you, but not any more than usual. But it is something interesting to consider. Fate of the Norns, which is this beautiful, just unbelievably beautifully crafted game that has horrible mechanics. Has this incredible system where you only get more experience by dying. So, well, you get experience, but you only get more Destiny experience by dying. So, the more heroic your death is, and the more like if you die and then your friends hold a funeral and there's like a certain person over the funeral and they recount all the great things that you've done, then you get more and more points for your next character who can like maybe be back from the dead, like from Valhalla or like from Muspelheim, like somebody who's like magical. And that takes quite a few deaths to get there, which I think is an interesting concept and something that I'd love to see in other games. This is a big smoke though, it's second smoke now. But the question, I guess, if there is a question in this ramble, is it noble to die in battle? Which is a pretty fucking heavy question. I understand that's not an easy thing to answer. But yeah, that's the thought I've been having for the last few days, or last day in particular. I've been listening to a lot of Dan Carlin's podcast, Blueprint for Armageddon, which is about World War I and all the awful things that happened there. And all of the terrible losses that happened for no good reason. And it's like a good contrast to the setting that I run mostly, which would be Yscloft, where every death in a battle is like celebrated. So I guess like in the settings that you run, what does death mean? If somebody dies in a battle, is that a big deal? Are the generals, if there are generals, are they like, oh, wow, that was a great sacrifice? Or are they like, okay, well, that's one less, but we still have 40,000 to throw in? I'm going to check the comments. Let's see. Checks, why am I here? I don't know, Checks. Go to bed, man. It's been too long. Don't forget the sacrifices of the warriors on Hill 340. Honestly, it comes down to what Stalin said. The death of one is a tragedy, death of millions just a statistic. That is a good point. That is a good point. People are like incapable of processing death on a large scale. Like the way you can't look at a crowd of like 1 million people and say that's 1 million people. It's just so many that you can't deal with it. So you're right. It becomes just a statistic, right? When it's so many, you like can't process the tragedy, so it just becomes like this like number up in the air somewhere. Barker, hey, how are you doing? So I'm talking about this thing that we were talking about yesterday. And it's just like got me thinking nonstop. Checks, yes, it is noble to die in defense of one's home and family, and strength is of course a value when a warrior culture is there. Yes, absolutely. Oh my, all these messages coming up. Those Worker History episodes are tough to listen to. They absolutely are, Rob. I find them really difficult to listen to. There was a section in one today, a captain in the British Army like writing his last letter home, and I like teared up on the bus. It was heartbreaking. Oy, so many messages. Good Lord. Oh my goodness. Checks. Also, well done knowing I am still awake. Jake says, Einar may be working toward an ignoble death if Thrust keeps trying to heal his festering gut wound. That's very true. That will not be a good way to go. There's Great War-esque conflict in Ancaeus history, which created a sort of global anti-war sentiment that was hundreds of years ago, and times when people change. Yes, I mean, that's something that I really think is interesting and that I would love to see in a setting, and I would actually wanted to talk to Michael Sham about this. It's like, this huge war, this war that ruins, hundreds of millions of casualties, whatever, surely the whole world after that is just like, no thank you, we're done with war. No way. Never again can this happen. It can't be allowed. So like they would just do whatever is necessary to make sure that doesn't happen. Which is like worth considering, right? It's like in these settings where war is constant, like how is that? I mean, I guess it's been a thing in our world, like war is pretty much constant up until World War I and then World War II, right? After that, large war is kind of stopped, and there was a real move away from the glory of war towards seeing it as more of a terrible thing. Okay, the messages are popping up so quickly that it keeps bringing me to the bottom and I can't read what's happening. Why are you being so difficult? Okay, Rob says, and I guess a good death is to die for a good cause. World War I stands as something. Oh man, yes. Oh my god. So this is happening here is that every time I scroll down to the bottom, it brings me, or scroll up to see the other messages, it brings me right to the bottom. So I'm just going to read that one. Hardcore history is seriously one of my own life's most important finds. He has ignited a passion for history and current events that has altered my perspective on reality in a fantastic way. I absolutely agree. Like, I've always been interested in history and the like, but Dan Carlin has a way of like measuring those things in like a real human way, and like showing you the awful stuff that can happen in a really specific human way, and making the Great War, which is just so opaque, impossible to figure out. I feel like I have a good grasp of it after listening to his show, which is just impossibly high praise. Kaya says, Peter Cook, I want you to lay down your life, Perkins. We need a futile gesture at this stage. It'll raise the whole tone of the war. Get up in a crate, Perkins. Pop over to... I can't read it. It keeps bringing me down to the bottom. I'm assuming this is a gnarly quote. So yeah, I just had this moment, particularly today, that really hammered home for me, was that this letter that this English captain had sent, or had written, and it was like, just heartbreaking. He was like, I have to do this, it's my duty, but also like, I adore you, my darling wife, I adore our child, but if I don't go, you know, you would also be upset with me. Which is like a heartbreaking thing to deal with, this idea that like, nobody wants to be there. And then also this is at the Somme. It was like, they had shelled all the place to hopefully get rid of the barbed wire, but it didn't work, and so they sent the first offense across, and all these like British soldiers were trying to get across, but there's like one gap in the barbed wire, and they're all like sheep, just like trying to get through this gap in the wire, and they just like get shelled to bits, and nothing is left. And then after that happens, they're like, to the second wave, okay, in you go, lads. And then they go, and then they all get killed as well. And then the third wave, they're like, okay, guys, now's your chance. It just doesn't make any sense to me, like how the officers are like sending these people in, how the people there at that moment, didn't just say, nope, we're not doing it. I'd rather get shot by this officer than go through that hell. Pretty crazy stuff. In the, I can't read that, what is that, Garhiend Republic, death is not the end of your service to the nation. Your corpse is raised and you join the Deathless Battalion until you are destroyed. This is viewed as a kind of coming of age. That is fucking gnarly. That's pretty metal. I mean, imagine how much worse the war could have been if necromancy was a thing. Happy it's not. Well, this has now rabbled into a three-smoke thought. I just think this is a really interesting topic. The question of, like, what does it mean to die heroically, and is that even a thing in certain types of war? Like, I just pictured this, like, enormous trench line, like 100 miles long, and all over it there are, like, these episodes, little tiny bits of heroism, but they're drowned out by just, like, constant machine gun fire and, like, shells fire, and all these people who die all over the place. And it's like, is there a noble bit to that war? Rob, this kind of war hadn't happened before. The glorious charge was still viewed as a viable tactic in a world where technology and had advanced to the point where hundreds could be killed instantly. That's absolutely true. There's all these crazy stories of like cavalry going in, like with breastplates and white gloves, like Napoleon's cuirassiers. Just madness. Just absolute. No one had a fucking clue what they were getting into. And I would like to, like, I really want to run something Great War-ish, and I would love for Michael Sham, if he's in here, or if he watches this later, to run me some sort of brutal-ass fucking trench warfare game in his Ironhead setting, because that shit is gnarly, and I want to experience that hell. I played an incredible game that Nick Dawson ran about the War of 1864. Prussia and Denmark fought a war. I mean, you could barely call it a war. Denmark just proceeded to get ground to paste by incredible artillery fire and stuff like that. Prussia, the biggest army in the world, or the best army in the world at that stage. And it was just brutal. It's really interesting to like put yourself in that frame of mind. Czech says, what would it mean for a warrior to have the question halfway though? Seeing the death of friends and family, the futile charges like the Great War showed us. You mentioned, how do you go on? That's a good question. Like, I mean, Dankar answers a lot, and I kind of think it as well. Like, how, like, put yourself in that position. Like, I don't think I could do it. I don't think that in that situation, I think that I would sooner be shot by the officer than charge into no man's land. And that probably makes me a coward, but, like, fucking hell. Such a waste of life, and there's no hope of victory there. So Simon says, also something to consider is with the discovery of guns, fighting lost a lot of the personal touch. That's very true. And I think it's really, guns were a thing, but there was still sort of clashes in like the Napoleonic era. I think it's like when artillery and machine guns became such a big thing that a charge was just impossible. There's like this crazy stat that Russia at the start of the World War I were like manufacturing 35,000 shells a month, and were using 45,000 shells a day. So it's like no one had a clue how much ammo was needed. No one had a clue how intense it was going to get. So Jake says, I would love to run a war-based game, particularly with other military vets that can apply their unique experience and perspective, and by run I mean play in. Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. I don't even think that you need to be a veteran in any sort of way to understand, or to like try and understand what it's like. Like maybe if you've been shot at, certainly, it would kind of enhance your experience, to put it lightly. But I think like anyone who like reads these or like watches like old accounts and stuff, particularly reading accounts of like Verdun and the Somme, can get a picture of what the hell was like. It's just like a war, nothing like anyone had seen before, just like endless misery, like rain like this where I am all the time. You're living in muck, there's rats everywhere, there's shit everywhere, there's dead bodies everywhere who are like falling out of the walls when you try to bury them, and then it rains, they fall back out. Just a hell on earth. So yeah, I don't really know what point I'm making anymore. I just kind of started rambling, continued rambling. I guess that's probably it. Okay, no, one more thing. So the thing that I was thinking of as well was to do with shield walls. So in the Viking tradition, battles would be fought with shield walls. Oh no, like that's not what I mean at all. I just mean I think there's like something to be said for like having a bunch of vets play a war game. I also just think that, yeah, it's like a universally human thing. Like if you read those accounts, it's harrowing to anybody in any situation. They thought they'd be home by Christmas. Yeah, it's heart-wrenching stuff. No clue and endless poetry. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like the Germans had like this offensive plan where they would like swing forces into France, knock them out in a month, and then go over to Russia and deal with them. And it just dragged on and on. But anyway, shield walls. Shield walls are were the peak of military technology in the Viking Age. You and all your companions would get your shields, and you would like smash them against each other, like lock them together with your side, smash them against the other side, and you would just push and hope that they would get tired before you did. And occasionally you would have people like crawling underneath to like stab up with spears, or over the top with spears. You would try to hook an opponent's shield with an axe, and that's like, it sounds hellish, really hellish. The exhaustion that would get to you so quickly, and things like that. And I think that's probably like the closest to the hell. Just like pushing and pushing and pushing, and like you can't stop. But the thing about all battles before this is that they were brief. Like battles would last a day at most, like an hour usually, less than that. And people would break and then they would run, and that would be the end of the battle. But again, the Great War, they would go on for months. 10 months Verdun went on for, and it's just staggering. I would really like to play something like this soon. I'll probably end up running something like this soon. The thing that stops me is that I would love to know more, and I feel like I don't know enough to do it. Well, I would do it justice, I think. It would feel like World War One, but I wouldn't have all the information on you know, the hundreds of kinds of shells and stuff that they do, and things like that. My click. In the show Vikings, what amazed me was the tactic of grabbing enemies, hurling them behind the shield wall, and having dudes with axes and knives back there waiting to quickly murder them. Yeah, I mean, that's what it is, right? It's just like this brutal fighting pit. And like, these people are pushing as hard as they can, so if you don't push for a second, they're going flying into your ranks. And you can just murder them back there. There would be dudes like walking around the side with bows and arrows, just like firing in the back. There would be like sneaky little fuckers like climbing under your legs to stab you in the crotch and ruin your life in these battles. It's just staggering. The other thing, I guess now this has stopped being about Victoria's dead and turned into war as hell. This is Battle of Cannae, or Cannae, however you say it, where the Carthaginians under Hannibal fought a battle against some Romans, and they got the full encirclement. So the Roman army was totally encircled by the Carthaginian army, and it took them a full day to kill everyone. So they just like were crushed in there, unable to move, and the Carthaginians killed, I want to say 50,000 people by hand, and that's just heavy. Like, you would not be the same after that. And that's another thing. Oh God, I can't stop talking about battles in RPGs. People come out of it and they're like, "Yeah, that was gnarly." Like, I don't think that's the response. I don't think that's the response for most people in that situation. Is, I think most people would leave a battle after killing a bunch of people by hand and think, "Oh God, what have I done?" And I think the aftermath of walking away from a battlefield, seeing thousands of bodies, no matter who you are, no matter what monster you are, no matter how you've been conditioned, is going to affect you. And even if you've been told your whole life that your purpose is to kill, and that you're better than others, and that by killing them you are more powerful and more successful and whatever, I still think no matter who, I think there's like a grain of humanity in all people that when they see destruction and death on that scale, everyone has to take a breath and just go, fuck, you know? And that's something that gets glossed over a lot. I guess it's like inconvenient for adventurers and for people who like kill for a living. That's basically what adventurers do, right? And particularly in the games that I run, people kill for a living. And it's like, oh, it's not the same because you're killing orcs, or it's not the same because you're killing elves, or whatever XYZ it might be. Still killing, still murdering, you know, sentient life. So yeah, I guess that's the grim point at which I will end this rambling discussion. Thank you to everybody who was here and contributed to the discussion. I'm probably going to throw up a hangout in a bit if anyone wants to chill out and shoot the shit about grim-faced war. Talk to you guys soon. Good luck.